Hey everyone, I'm back. So today I want to talk about something a little icky, especially for me. This has probably been one of my hardest lessons in life is to work out where I was coming from, how I was reacting. And I had to kind of start owning when I was doing a poor me and being a victim. I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to put my hand up and say I was a poor me. I was a massive victim. I had so many stories and some really, really good excuses. And I used to get triggered. So when someone criticized me, I would go into stories and create dramas. I used to be a real drama queen. And then I'd ask, why is this always happening to me? No one understands. Why does this keep happening? Why can't I be lucky like everyone else? And you know what? Because I wasn't owning it. I wasn't owning my things. So we have to decide to grow up and take responsibility for ourselves and lose the stories, lose the labels, and start coming from a place of self-responsibility and owning it. And so my story is that I always got injured and sometimes get weird tropical illnesses too. And now this is really interesting because this started when I was at university. My very first boyfriend or fiance had a brain injury. He had a brain hemorrhage. We were building a house and doing an extension, and he nearly died in front of us. And it was the day before my exams of first year. And I was a real doer in those days. You know what? While he was on the operating table, my sister, bless her, drove me for 3 hours up to the university town. I did my exam. I drove home and sat by his side. I sat there at his bedside studying all night. But what happened after that got really interesting is I started turning his accident into excuses for not getting my exams done, for failing that exam, for not showing up. I started bludging. I started turning into a poor me. And I'm sure a lot of those patterns were imprinted well before that. And then when him and I broke up, I still used his injury and his illness as my excuse in life. You know, why does this always happen to me? And then it was only recently when I had one too many injuries that I thought, I have to own this. Why do I keep getting injured? Why do I keep getting myself in these situations? What can I do to make a change? How can I take control of my life so I protect my body and so I'm safer and so I stop getting hurt? And I had to stop rushing around. I had to, and because I couldn't save him, it took it upon my life to try and save everyone else before I looked after myself. And this all became part of my story. And I would react from it. When I couldn't cope, I would find myself getting an injury because I was so tired and acopic that I would hurt myself. And then that injury would give me the break I was looking for, right? So today I'm really going to ask you to step up and look at your patterns. What happens when you get triggered? What happens when someone puts you under pressure? What happens if your boss or your business pushes you? How do you react? And do you fall into victimhood and poor me stories? Because we have to remember we've always got a choice. Every minute we get to choose, and we get to look at our stories and say, do I want to keep coming from this place? Do I want to keep being this poor me, this poor sparrow with constantly the dislocated shoulder or the broken sternum or the broken arm or the inflamed costal joints? Or do I want to slow down and learn to move with ease, grace, and flow? And learn to say no. And learn to say, no, that doesn't work for me. And then learn to choose that I can show up where I really need to show up. So what about when we're tired? Sometimes we know we've got a really important week at work or in our business or in our sport, our lifestyle, and someone tries to bend our wobbly arm. My arm was so rubbery and I'd always stay for one more drink or one more party. But then I'd get extra tired and I wouldn't be able to put the energy I wanted into my life and my business, and then everything would go on hold. I wasn't able to perform for my bosses and my owners or my students in the way I wanted to. And I'd made a choice. I'd made a choice to not look after myself. So my wheel was looking like a jagged star, and I wasn't choosing to show up as the very best version of me. And then I'd start hiding behind stories. Does this make sense? I learned this story when I was watching a friend of mine and one of my mentors, Regan Hillier, talk. And she said something that has stuck in my mind for years. As you know, ex-nurse, I take everything back to injuries. And she said, what's the difference between a lotto winner and a paraplegic? A lotto winner kind of accidentally wins money, but a paraplegic chooses to be successful. And often the paraplegic is more successful than the lotto winner. And often the lotto winners will lose everything they've got, but often paraplegics will go on to become really good at what they're doing. Most paraplegics I know are excellent in their sport. They're excellent leadership and personal motivator speakers. So what do you choose? Every day, every time you react, every time you make an excuse, every time you get triggered, every time you're not coming from a grounded ownership place of I am me and I can do this and I will show up as the very best version of me. Catch yourself and ask yourself, what are you choosing? Are you choosing to make a really bad mistake, or are you choosing to make a really poor excuse for something that actually deep down inside you could control, or you could make better choices? What do you choose today? How do you choose to show up? And how do you choose to change? It's a really good question. But this is where we make our biggest transformations, is through self-reflection. And so I ask you, every time you get too tired, every time you want to stay and party and have another drink, or do that extra gym class that actually could push you over the edge, or do something that's not totally in alignment with your vision and where you want to get to and the goals you want to reach, just keep asking yourself, what do I choose? Is that in alignment with the greatest good for me? Is that in alignment with my future paced self? Is that really in alignment for me? So sit down on your own and take a good, hard look at yourself. Where have you made excuses? I remember when I was going to do a triathlon, and I kind of just got carried away. I think we were doing lots of sailing regattas, and I chose to stay up and drink rosé with the boys all night instead of get up early and train. And then I got home and all my friends had continued training and I was really behind. And then I actually created this injury and this poor me story to get out of the triathlon, rather than just say, I was really slack this week, but I'm going to make better choices and I'm going to get up and I'm going to show up and do that regatta. And I'm going to show up and do that triathlon. and I'm going to give it everything I've got. Right? So sit down and write a list of times that you haven't been true to yourself, that you've made excuses for not looking after your health or your business or your career, your relationships, where you've hid behind illness or money problems or relationship breakdowns or parental abuse. And we all have stories. And I know so many of you have had hard lives. So many of you have experienced trauma. So many of you have lost people you love. So many of you have lost limbs. So many of you have had accidents. But remember, every moment we get to choose, and we get to work with what we've got. And if I could leave you with another amazing transformational life-changing story. When I was 18 and working in a nursing home, there was a guy called Joe. And Joe had been quite a famous lawyer and solicitor and politician in our town. And I always used to know his name and face from all the billboards around town. He was really famous and, you know, on TV all the time. And one day he had a stroke. Probably because he wasn't looking after his will. And he probably, in hindsight, chose to work more than look after his cholesterol and his blood pressure and his health and his heart. But anyway, he had a stroke, and all he could do was use his right hand. And so he learned to draw, and he became a really great artist and actually did exhibitions and things. And then one day I turned up to work, and Joe had fallen in the shower and broken his right wrist. All he had left. And now he was just a head in a bed. And the 18-year-old version of myself was like, oh my God, Joe, this is terrible. What are you going to do? You can't draw now. You've got no life. Like, oh my, you know, he was writing books and doing drawings and everything with his right hand. And I was like, what are you going to do? Like, this is so terrible. Your life is over. And he looked at me and he said, darling child, this is just the beginning. This is just a phase. I get to experience life as just ahead. And I'll find a way to write a book. And sure enough, someone came and invented a machine that he could use a straw and blow out his words somehow. I don't know how the machine worked. And he got to write a book that totally changed my life, called Just Ahead. So remember, we get to choose. We get to choose. And no matter how bad it is, we get to choose to get up, and we get to choose to do one thing or three things that make a difference each day. And we get to choose how we can work with what we've got to make our life the most epic experience. Okay? So remember, to transform, to show up, to be the best version of yourself, you get to choose, and you get to choose right now. How are you going to look at each area of your life? How are you going to make those changes that you need to be the very best version of yourself? How are you going to choose to show up today? All right? Lots of love. I'll see you soon, and a day.